Hello, dear friends. Before we begin this gentle journey into history and quiet reflection, please take a moment to subscribe and join our peaceful community. Together, we'll explore stories that soothe the mind and calm the heart, perfect for drifting off to sleep. Now, find a comfortable place, let your body relax, and allow my voice to guide you softly through the lost years of Mary Magdalene. A story whispered in the quiet shadows of time. Let's begin. Night was gently settling over the shores of the Sea of Galilee. The wind, like a weary traveler, moved along the water, smoothing the ripples as the moon slowly climbed above the hills. Everything around seemed to dissolve into a soft silver glow, the boats resting at the pier, the shadows of fishing nets, the distant outlines of palm trees swaying in the breeze. It was an hour when some had already surrendered to sleep, and others were still searching for rest. Down a narrow path toward the water walked a woman. She moved slowly, as if afraid to disturb the silence with her breath. Her steps were steady, yet carried the caution of someone who had seen much and understood even more. This woman was Mary of Magdala. Many knew her name, but few truly knew her. There was a depth in her gaze, the kind shaped by inner storms long weathered. In recent years, her life had changed more than she ever thought possible. And yet, in these quiet nights when the world paused, Mary allowed herself to remember the path that had brought her here. She sat upon a smooth stone near the water's edge. A gentle wave touched the hem of her garment, as if greeting an old friend. Mary closed her eyes, drew in the cool, damp air, and memories began to rise, some vivid, others soft as moonlight. Hidden within those memories were her lost years, the ones rarely spoken of. The years before she became one of the most devoted followers, and the years that came after. Now, seated beside the one witness she trusted completely, the night sea, Mary was ready to remember everything. Thus began a story long kept in the quiet folds of time. The story of a woman the world knew far too little, and far too much all at once. Long before her name became woven into history, Mary was simply a girl from Magdala, a bustling fishing village on the western shore of the Great Lake. The mornings there always began the same, with the calls of fishermen pushing their boats into the water, and the scent of freshly cut wood drifting from the workshops lining the narrow streets. Mary remembered those days with a distant fondness. Her family home stood close enough to the harbor that she could hear the steady rhythm of waves even at night. Her mother used to say the lake had a voice, calm when it wished to comfort, fierce when it wished to warn. Mary listened closely, learning early that the world spoke in ways beyond words. She was a curious child, always asking questions that unsettled the elders. Why did certain stars vanish in one season and reappear in another? Why did some strangers arrive at the market with stories of lands that sounded impossibly far away? Why did people fear so many things they had never seen? Her father would laugh softly and tell her she was born with a mind that wandered. But her mother recognized something else, a quiet strength, a hunger for understanding, and a gentleness that drew people to her even before she learned the ways of kindness. As Mary grew older, Magdala grew noisier. Roman officials passed through more often, sometimes with caravans, sometimes with soldiers. Foreign merchants set up stalls with bright fabrics and unfamiliar spices. Life was changing, and with it came both opportunity and unrest. But even amid this growing chaos, Mary often slipped away to sit by the water. She would watch the fishermen at dusk, lanterns glowing on their boats, like floating stars. She listened to the lake's voice and felt it speak to her in tones of patience and mystery. Those quiet evenings were where her sense of purpose began to form, though she would not recognize it until much later. For now, she was simply a young woman in a growing village, unaware that the world beyond Magdala was preparing to call her into stories far larger than she could imagine. And yet, even then, the calm of those memories now soothed her heart, like ripples spreading gently across the water of a life long traveled. There came a time in Mary's youth when the peaceful rhythms of Magdala began to shift. It happened slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, like the way darkness creeps across the lake before sunrise. People whispered more. Doors closed earlier. Travelers hurried through the village with lowered eyes, unwilling to linger. Mary felt it before she fully understood it. A heaviness in the air. A tension that made even the gentle waves sound different. Her father had begun returning home later than usual, his brow furrowed, his once light-hearted stories replaced by quiet sighs. Roman tax collectors had increased their presence, and with them came fear, the kind that slips into a household without knocking. Mary often overheard hushed conversations at night, warnings about raids, rumors of rebellion, worries about how quickly a life could change. Yet the true shift for Mary came not from the world outside but from within herself. She started experiencing moments, brief, disorienting flashes, when emotions she couldn't name surged through her. A sadness with no origin. A sense of dread that appeared without reason. Some days she felt as though she were drifting outside her own thoughts, watching her life from a distance. Her mother would find her sitting alone by the water, staring at the horizon as if waiting for something unseen. "You carry storms inside you," she once whispered, brushing Mary's hair with gentle fingers. "But even storms have their purpose." The villagers, however, were less understanding. They noticed her solitude, her quiet intensity, the way she spoke about the world as if she sensed things others did not. And people, when faced with what they cannot explain, often turn to fear. Some called her troubled. Others claimed she was cursed or ill-omened. A few avoided her altogether. Mary felt the weight of their stares, yet she tried to hold on to the calm she once found so easily. She continued to sit by the lake, hoping its familiar voice might soothe her, but even the water seemed to reflect her unease now. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky burned gold, Mary realized that the path ahead of her was changing. The world she had known was slipping away, and something, though she could not yet define it, was calling to her. A quiet pull, like a whisper on the wind. A promise that the shadows gathering around her life were not the end, but the beginning of a journey that would shape everything to come. Mary remembered the day with unusual clarity, as though the memory had been carved into the air itself. The sun was high, the road dusty, and Magdala buzzed with the usual noise of merchants and fishermen. Yet beneath that familiar bustle, Mary felt a quiet trembling inside her, the same unease that had shadowed her for months. She had gone to the outskirts of the village to clear her thoughts, walking the long path that wound between olive groves and stony fields. It was a place where shepherds often passed, and travelers paused to rest in the shade. Mary liked it there. The land felt open, the sky wide enough to breathe under. That afternoon, as she rounded a bend in the road, she noticed a small group of men approaching. They walked with the easy familiarity of companions who have spent many miles together, their sandals coated with dust, their robes worn by travel. But one man stood slightly ahead of the others. He wasn't imposing, yet there was something quietly commanding about him, a calm that seemed to move with him like a second skin. His face was sun-warmed, his expression peaceful, and when his gaze lifted toward Mary, she felt as though he saw her not as the villagers did, but as she truly was. Not troubled. Not cursed. Simply known. The moment their eyes met, the strange heaviness inside Mary seemed to shift, as though someone had gently opened a door she didn't realize had been locked. A warmth spread through her chest, not dramatic, not overwhelming, but steady and unmistakably real. The man paused, offering a small, understanding smile. He said nothing, yet Mary felt the quiet weight of something meaningful pass between them. His companions exchanged glances but did not interrupt. They seemed accustomed to encounters they could not fully explain. And then, as simply as he had appeared, the man continued down the road, leaving Mary standing in the dust and sunlight, breathlessly still. She didn't know his name. She didn't know why he looked at her that way. But something inside her shifted, subtly, profoundly, like the first crack of dawn breaking through a long night. Later she would learn who he was. Later the world would know his name. But for now, all Mary knew was that the whisper she had felt for so long had grown stronger, and the path of her life had begun to turn. In the days that followed, Mary found herself returning to that road again and again, though she could not explain why. She told no one about the encounter, not her parents, not the neighbors who watched her closely, not even herself in whispered thoughts at night. Something inside her had shifted, but she treated it with the same care one gives to a fragile lantern flame, gently, privately, protectively. Meanwhile, Magdalene was stirring with whispers. Travelers passing through the marketplace spoke of a teacher wandering from village to village, a healer who touched the broken and left them whole, a man who spoke with an authority unlike the priests, yet with a gentleness unlike any leader the people had known. Some claimed he cast out darkness from those tormented by it. Some said he spoke of forgiveness like it was a door anyone could walk through. Others insisted he was a prophet, perhaps even something more. Mary listened from the edges of crowds, leaning against stone walls or pretending to examine baskets of figs while her ears strained to catch every word. Each story felt like a brushstroke painting a portrait she almost recognized. One evening, as she helped her mother grind grain in their courtyard, the conversation drifted to the healer again. Her mother spoke in a hushed voice, as though afraid the wind might overhear. "They say he looks at people as if he sees their hearts," she murmured. "They say people feel different after meeting him." Mary felt her breath catch. She set down the stone grinder, her hands suddenly unsteady. Her mother noticed, pausing her work. "What troubles you, child?" Mary hesitated. The truth sat on her tongue, warm and persistent. But how could she explain something she herself barely understood? How could she say, "I think I have met him," when she wasn't even certain? So she shook her head softly. "Nothing. I'm only tired." But she wasn't tired. She was awake, more awake than she had felt in years. That night, long after her parents had gone to sleep, Mary stood outside beneath the quiet shimmer of stars. The air was cool, the lake whispering gently in the distance. She closed her eyes and let the memory of the stranger's gaze wash through her once more. The rumors spreading through Galilee no longer felt like stories of a faraway figure. They felt like ripples moving toward her, ripples from a single moment on a dusty road. A moment she would soon understand had been the start of everything. Not long after the rumors began to swirl through Magdala, the inner storms Mary had fought for so long grew stronger. They came without warning, trembling waves of fear, sudden bursts of sorrow, flashes of anger that did not belong to her. It was as though shadows inside her had awakened and were fighting for space in her mind. The villagers noticed. A shattered jar. A moment of panic in the marketplace. A night when she wandered from home and was found at dawn sitting by the lake, eyes distant and unfocused. People whispered louder now. Some avoided her path entirely. Others looked at her with pity they did not truly feel. Mary tried to anchor herself in the familiar, the scent of baking bread, the rhythm of drawing water from the well, the softness of woven linens beneath her fingers. But even these comforts seemed fragile, unable to hold her steady when the storms rose. Her mother watched her with growing worry, often resting a gentle hand on Mary's shoulder as if trying to lend her strength through touch alone. Her father grew more silent, troubled by the weight he could not lift from his daughter's heart. One evening, as dusk melted into night, Mary stood by the water's edge, her reflection wavering on the dark surface. She felt tears slip down her cheeks without knowing why. "What is happening to me?" she whispered to the lake, though she knew it could not answer. She pressed her palms to her temples, trying to calm the racing thoughts, the voices of fear and doubt that did not sound like her own. The world felt too loud, too sharp, too close. She could not find the peace she once knew so easily. Then, somewhere inside that turmoil, a memory surfaced, faint but steady. The calm gaze of the stranger on the road. Something in her heart stirred, a soft echo of warmth pressing against the shadows within. It did not banish the fear, but it cut through the darkness just enough for her to breathe. Mary sank to her knees on the shore, trembling. She did not know the healer's name yet. She did not know where to find him, or if she ever would. But the thought of him, the strange, inexplicable calm he carried, ignited a small spark of hope. And sometimes, she realized, hope begins not with answers, but with the memory of someone who looked at you and saw more than your suffering. In the quiet pulse of that moment, Mary made a silent promise. If their paths crossed again, she would not turn away. Days slipped into weeks, and Mary's inner storms only deepened. Yet alongside the fear, there was now a quiet thread of longing, a sense that somewhere, beyond the familiar paths of Magdala, lay the key to her healing. Then one afternoon, while helping her mother carry baskets of linen to the marketplace, Mary heard a voice rise above the usual noise of bartering and footsteps. "He is near Capernaum, they say," a fisherman told another. "Crowds follow him everywhere." "Who?" the second man asked. "The healer. The teacher. Some call him Rabbi, though he has no place in the synagogues. They say his words are like water on dry ground." Mary froze, her hands tightening around the basket handles. Another woman joined the conversation, lowering her voice as if she spoke something precious. They say his name is Yeshua of Nazareth. The world seemed to still around Mary. The name struck her with gentle force, familiar though she had never heard it spoken before. Yeshua. The sound was simple, yet full, like the first breath after waking. As the travelers continued sharing stories, Mary listened without moving. They spoke of a man who touched the sick without hesitation. A man who spoke of mercy as though it were the most natural thing in the world. A man who drew near to those people avoided, the poor, the forgotten, the tormented. Some called him a prophet. Others whispered he might be the one the people of Israel had awaited for generations. Most simply said, "He helps those no one else can." Mary's heartbeat quickened. The calm she had felt on the road, the warmth that had cut through her darkness, it all aligned now with a clarity she could not deny. That stranger, that gaze, that presence, it had been him. When the crowds dispersed and the marketplace returned to its usual rhythm, Mary stood still, her breath unsteady. Her mother touched her arm gently. "Mary? Are you unwell?" Mary shook her head, though her eyes glistened. "No," she whispered. "I think I finally know what I must do." That night, long after her parents fell asleep, Mary walked to the lake's edge once more. The moon shone across the water like a path of silver leading into the distance. She whispered his name to the quiet waves, Yeshua, and felt something within her strengthen, a small but steady flame rising against her inner shadows. If he was truly near Capernaum, then she would find him. Not because of the rumors. Not because of the awe others felt. But because, for the first time in years, Mary felt hope powerful enough to walk toward. The journey ahead would be difficult, but it would change her life forever. Mary left Magdala before dawn. The village still slept, wrapped in the soft blue light of early morning. Smoke had not yet risen from the ovens, fishermen had not yet pushed their boats into the lake, and the streets lay silent except for the faint sigh of wind brushing against stone walls. She carried nothing but a small pouch of bread and a shawl draped over her shoulders. Her parents did not wake as she slipped out. She had kissed their foreheads in the dark and prayed they would understand later, when words finally came. The road to Capernaum wound along the lake's shimmering edge. As Mary walked, the waters glowed gold with the rising sun, each wave catching the light like a whisper of promise. Yet with every step, she felt the familiar tension inside her, the shadows that weighed her thoughts, the trembling in her chest, the whispers of doubt. What if you never find him? What if he cannot help you? What if the darkness is stronger than hope? She pressed her fingers to her temples and kept walking. The journey took hours. Travelers passed her, fishermen carrying nets, women balancing jugs of water, merchants urging donkeys laden with goods. Some gave her curious glances, others hurried past without looking. Just outside a cluster of olive trees, Mary paused to rest. She sank onto a large stone and let her gaze drift across the lake. A flock of birds rose from the reeds, filling the air with gentle movement. For a moment, the world felt peaceful. But then the familiar wave of fear struck her, sudden, sharp, like cold water poured over her spirit. Her breath hitched. Her vision blurred. A trembling ran through her hands. She closed her eyes tightly, willing it to pass. It did not. She pressed her palms to the earth, grounding herself, whispering fragments of prayers she had learned as a child. Still, the shadows swirled. Then, faintly, carried on the breeze, she heard voices, many voices, rising from the direction of Capernaum. Excited, hopeful, urgent. She lifted her head. Crowds, dozens of them, gathered on the road ahead. And in the center of those voices, Mary felt, rather than heard, something shift. A presence. Warm, steady, unmistakably familiar. Her heart pounded. Her breath steadied. The shadows inside her recoiled as if a door had opened, letting in light. Mary rose to her feet, her legs trembling but her resolve firm. She did not yet see him. But she knew with absolute certainty. Yeshua was near. And her life, long overshadowed by fear, was about to change forever. As Mary neared Capernaum, the sound of voices grew louder, a swelling mixture of excitement, awe, and urgent need. People lined the road, some standing on stones or low walls to see above the crowd. Others pushed forward with outstretched hands, hoping to draw near the healer they had heard so much about. Mary's heart thudded in her chest. Her palms were damp. The shadows within her stirred restlessly, sensing change. She slipped into the edge of the crowd, weaving between men and women of all ages. Some carried their sick, others whispered prayers under their breath. Children clung to their mothers' robes, their eyes wide with wonder. A man beside her murmured to his companion, "He healed a man possessed, right here in this town." As if the darkness had no strength at all. Mary swallowed hard. The words pierced her deeply. She pushed forward slowly, each step feeling both heavy and necessary. The closer she came, the more the air seemed to shift, not in temperature, but in presence. A strange warmth pressed gently against her fear, soothing it like a hand placed kindly upon a wounded heart. Then, suddenly, the crowd parted just enough for her to see him. He stood near the water, speaking to a group gathered at his feet. His voice was calm, steady, yet somehow carried clearly even above the murmurs around him. There was nothing extravagant about him. His clothes were simple, his posture relaxed, and yet the people looked at him with an almost desperate trust. Mary's breath caught. It was him. The man from the road. The one whose gaze had cut through her shadows like morning light. Yeshua. Her legs trembled as a wave of emotion swept over her, relief, fear, hope, and something deeper she could not name. She felt the inner darkness recoil, tightening its grip as if afraid of the very sight of him. The crowd pressed around her. Someone jostled her shoulder, another stepped in front of her. But Mary did not move back. She kept her eyes locked on him, every beat of her heart echoing like a drum inside her. At that moment, he lifted his head, just slightly, as though sensing something. And their eyes met. The noise of the crowd faded. The trembling inside her stilled. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to pause. Yeshua looked at her not with surprise, but with recognition, as though he had been expecting her. His expression was gentle, filled with a compassion so steady it made Mary's breath tremble. Then he stepped forward. Not toward the wealthy. Not toward the loudest voices. But toward her. Mary felt her knees weaken. The journey, the fear, the long years of inner storms, all of it converged on this single, quiet moment. The moment she had not dared to hope for, yet had been moving toward her entire life. And as he approached, the light within him grew stronger, while the shadows inside her began to break. Yeshua stepped toward Mary with a calm certainty, the crowd instinctively parting as he moved. People watched in silence, sensing something significant unfolding, though they did not know her name or her story. Mary tried to steady her breath, but her chest tightened, and the familiar weight of fear pressed hard against her ribs. The closer he came, the more the shadows inside her writhed, as if struggling against the nearness of something they could not withstand. Mary lowered her gaze, unable to meet his eyes again. What if he turns away? What if I am beyond help? What if all those whispers were right? Her thoughts tangled in fear. Then she felt it. A hand, warm and steady, resting lightly on her shoulder. Her breath caught. Her entire body stilled. "Mary," he said softly. He spoke her name as though it were a prayer, not a burden. As though he was calling her back to herself. She looked up, tears forming without warning. There was no judgment in his eyes. No fear. No pity. Only compassion, deep, unwavering, ancient as the light above the waters of creation. "I know the weight you carry," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "And it need not remain with you." Mary's knees trembled. The inner storm surged violently, a final resistance, and a strangled sob escaped her. She could not speak. Could not explain. Could only stand there, trembling, as everything she had tried to contain for years rose to the surface. Yeshua placed his other hand gently at her temple, his touch grounding, steady, unhurried. And then, with a quiet authority that held no force yet filled every breath of air around them, he whispered, "Be free." The world went silent. Mary felt the shadows inside her wrench and recoil as if pulled from a deep place. A sharp cry escaped her lips, not of pain, but of release, and she fell to her knees on the dusty ground. The weight that had clung to her for so long, the darkness that had clouded her mind, lifted like mist burned away by the morning sun. She inhaled deeply. For the first time in years, the air felt light. Her chest no longer trembled. Her thoughts no longer tore at her. Her spirit felt clear, steady, whole. Mary looked up through blurred vision. Yeshua stood before her, his expression peaceful, as though this moment had always been part of her path. "You are restored," he said softly. Mary bowed her head, tears falling freely onto the earth, not from sorrow, but from a profound, overwhelming sense of peace. The crowd murmured in amazement, but Mary barely heard them. All she could feel was the quiet within her, the quiet she had longed for, prayed for, and finally found. Her lost years had ended in that moment. And a new life, one she could not yet imagine, had just begun. The world around Mary softened into a gentle blur. The voices of the crowd, once loud and pressing, now drifted like echoes carried on a distant breeze. Even the sunlight seemed quieter, falling over the lake in long, shimmering ribbons, as though the day itself had slowed to breathe with her. Mary remained kneeling for a moment longer, letting the calm settle into the deepest parts of her spirit. It was a calm she had never known, warm, steady, like the hush that follows a passing storm. Her breath flowed easily now, rising and falling like the tide against the shore. When she finally lifted her gaze, Yeshua was still there, watching her with a patience that felt almost timeless. There was no rush in him, no urgency, only a quiet stillness, as if he understood that healing was not a single moment, but a gentle unfolding. Mary rose slowly to her feet, the world steady beneath her for the first time in years. The earth felt firm. The air tasted clean. Her mind, once filled with chaos, was soft and open, like a fresh morning sky. "You are safe now," Yeshua said in a voice that rolled through her like a calm wave. "Walk in peace." The words settled around her like a cloak, warm and light. Mary nodded, unable to speak. She felt as though anything she said might break the fragile beauty of the moment. Instead, she simply breathed, long, slow breaths, letting the quiet wrap gently around her. The crowd began to disperse, still murmuring, still marveling, but Mary heard them as though from far away. She stepped aside, finding a place near the water where reeds swayed softly at the shoreline. The lake shimmered before her. Each ripple reflected the sunlight in a way that made the world feel gentle and safe. Mary sank slowly onto a smooth stone, drawing her shawl around her shoulders. She closed her eyes and let the sounds of Capernaum drift past her, the soft rhythm of footsteps, the distant calls of fishermen, the rustle of olive branches in the breeze. Everything felt softened. Everything felt slower. Everything felt new. Her mind wandered back to the long road from Magdala, the fear, the trembling, the whispers of doubt, and then drifted forward into this moment of peace. The contrast was so vast it almost felt like waking from a long, restless dream. Mary opened her eyes and looked across the lake one more time. In the distance, Yeshua was walking away with his companions, moving at a calm, unhurried pace. She watched until they disappeared beyond a cluster of trees, their silhouettes fading into the golden afternoon. She did not feel abandoned. She did not feel uncertain. She simply felt held by quiet, by breath, by the soft unfolding of a new beginning. And as the gentle waves touched the shore, Mary whispered a single, steady thought. "My life has changed, and I am ready." Mary remained by the lakeshore long after the crowds had dispersed. The sun drifted lower in the sky, softening into a warm, honey-colored glow that rested quietly on the water. The waves, once lively with the movements of boats and people, now brushed the shore in slow, rhythmic patterns, like a lullaby shaped by the land itself. She pulled her shawl a little tighter around her shoulders, not because she was cold, but because the light touch of fabric helped her feel anchored, present, calm, held by the moment. For the first time in many years, her thoughts moved gently, like leaves drifting on a quiet stream. She thought of her mother's worried eyes, her father's silence, the whispers of neighbors, all the small wounds she had carried, each one leaving a mark she had grown accustomed to. And yet, now, those memories felt distant, softened at the edges, as though wrapped in a veil of peace. Mary let out a long breath, slow and steady. The evening deepened around her. Olive trees swayed with a sleepy rustle. Distant fishermen called to one another with soft voices that echoed across the fading light. A pair of herons glided low over the water, their wings whispering as they passed. Mary leaned back on her hands, feeling the warmth of the stone beneath her palms. The earth felt familiar again, not harsh, not overwhelming, just solid and steady. she whispered into the quiet, though no one was near to hear. "Thank you?" Her words drifted away, carried by the breeze. The sky slowly shifted from gold to rose, then from rose to a deep, soothing blue. A few early stars began to glimmer, faint at first, then growing brighter, like small promises scattered across the heavens. Mary watched them appear, one by one, until the sky felt full. As the first coolness of night brushed her cheek, she closed her eyes and listened to the gentle hush of the lake. The sound was constant and calming, rising and falling with the same slow tempo as her breath. For a moment, she felt as though the world was exhaling with her, as though creation itself had paused to rest. And in that stillness, Mary understood something softly, quietly. Peace wasn't something she had to chase. It was something she could allow. A presence. A settling. A calm that blossomed when she finally stopped running from herself. As night took its place over Galilee, Mary rose to her feet, her movements unhurried, her spirit soothed. She began walking along the shore toward the small homes of Capernaum, each step slow and thoughtful, like a lullaby unfolding into the night. The day had been long, full of change and release, yet she felt no exhaustion. Only a gentle readiness for whatever dawn would bring. With the stars guiding her path and the soft waves whispering beside her, Mary stepped into the quiet night, her heart resting in its newfound stillness. Capernaum at night was quieter than Mary expected. As she walked through its narrow streets, small lamps flickered behind doorways, casting warm pools of light onto the ground. Families murmured softly inside their homes, the gentle rhythm of evening prayers, the rustle of blankets, the quiet laughter of children settling down for sleep. Mary moved slowly, her steps light, as though she were drifting through a dream. She paused near a small courtyard where a family sat beneath a vine-covered trellis. The mother hummed a low melody, rocking a child in her arms. The father tended a tiny fire, its glow reflected softly in his eyes. Their voices blended with the night air, warm, calm, almost like a song woven just for the darkness. Mary lingered there a moment longer, warmed by the simple tenderness of the scene. It reminded her of Magdalene, of quieter days before her inner storms had risen. And though a touch of sadness brushed her heart, it was gentle, like a memory laid to rest beneath a soft blanket. She continued down the path until the sound of the lake returned, a low, repeating hush against the shore. The breeze carried the scent of water and reeds, cool and familiar. Mary breathed it in, letting it quiet the last of the tension in her chest. Finding a sheltered place beneath an olive tree, she settled onto the ground, her back resting against the trunk. The tree's branches spread above her like an open hand, the leaves whispering softly with each shift of the wind. In the distance, somewhere just beyond sight, she imagined Yeshua and his companions resting after the long day. Perhaps they sat around a small fire too, speaking in low voices, sharing bread, offering prayers to the growing night. Mary closed her eyes and felt the peaceful weight of weariness settling into her limbs, not the heavy exhaustion of fear, but the gentle drowsiness that follows a day of release. She listened to the night sounds, the chirping of crickets, the soft splash of fish breaking the water surface, the distant calls of shepherds gathering their flocks. The world felt safe, slow, wrapped in quiet. And for the first time in many years, Mary drifted into sleep without fear. held by the soft breath of the Galilee night. Mary awoke before sunrise. Her eyes opened to a sky still touched by night, a deep blue stretching overhead, fading slowly toward the horizon where hints of gold began to gather. The world was cool and hushed, wrapped in that delicate stillness that comes just before the dawn. She rose slowly, brushing dust from her shawl, and stepped toward the lake shore. The water lay smooth and calm, reflecting the earliest glimmers of morning light. A thin mist hovered just above the surface, drifting like a soft veil across the water. As the sun began to rise, its light spread gently, turning the lake into a sheet of shimmering glass. The first birds of morning lifted their voices, not loud, but steady, like small bells ringing in the quiet. Mary stood there, breathing in the cool air, feeling as though she were witnessing the world being created anew. Her mind was clear, her spirit still, her heart open. The peace she felt was not the fragile peace of fleeting moments. It was deeper, anchored within her, steady as the tide that met the shore. When she finally turned away from the lake, she saw a small group of people walking along the road. Their pace was unhurried, their steps steady, and at the center of them walked Yeshua. Mary felt no rush to meet him, no desperation, no fear. Instead, she simply walked toward them, her stride calm and effortless, as though her path had always been meant to merge with theirs. When they drew near, Yeshua lifted his gaze and smiled, soft, warm, recognizing her before she said a word. "Mary," he greeted her, his voice quiet as morning air. She bowed her head slightly, her heart glowing with a gentle warmth. "May I walk with you?" she asked softly. "You may," he replied with the peaceful ease of someone welcoming a friend already known. And so Mary joined the small group as the day began, the morning sun rising behind them, casting long, sleepy shadows on the path. Each step they took felt gentle, as though the world itself moved in silence beside them, guiding, holding, and preparing them for the quiet mysteries yet to unfold. The path leading out of Capernaum wound gently through open fields where barley swayed in the early light. Dew clung to each blade of grass, catching the morning sun and scattering it into tiny sparks of gold. As Mary walked with the small group, she noticed how quiet everything felt, not empty, but serene, as though the land itself were waking slowly, stretching beneath the rising warmth. The disciples spoke little. Their voices, when they did speak, were soft and thoughtful. Some were still wiping sleep from their eyes, others walked with hands clasped behind their backs, quietly studying the landscape. Mary matched their pace with ease. Each step felt unhurried, steady, almost rhythmic, like the slow beat of a drum guiding travelers across familiar ground. At one point, a gentle breeze drifted across the field, brushing against Mary's cheeks and lifting strands of her hair. It carried with it the scent of earth, grain, and distant wildflowers. She breathed it in deeply, feeling a calmness settle through her chest. A few paces ahead, Yeshua walked in silence, his presence both strong and restful. The disciples didn't cling to him or push close. They simply walked near, comfortable in the shared quiet. Mary found herself doing the same, not seeking attention, only embracing the peaceful companionship of the path. As the sun climbed higher, shadows shortened, and the day took on a soft warmth. Birds flew overhead in lazy arcs, their wings gliding through the air with almost no sound at all. Mary watched them for a time, feeling her thoughts drift like feathers on a slow-moving current. There was no urgency in their journey, only a gentle progression forward, one step after another, the road stretching before them like a long, calming breath. And Mary felt, in a quiet and certain way, that she belonged here. Not because of who she had been, but because of the peace blossoming within her now, a peace that matched the steady rhythm of the road. By midday, the heat settled gently over the hills, and the group paused beneath a wide fig tree whose branches offered shade like an open canopy. Its leaves rustled softly above them, creating shifting patterns of light that danced across the ground. The shade felt cool against Mary's skin, and she lowered herself onto the grass with a grateful, slow exhale. The disciples sat in small clusters, sharing bread and dried figs, their conversations muted and warm. Laughter bubbled now and then, low, easy, the kind born from companionship rather than excitement. Mary accepted a small piece of bread from one of the women traveling with them, offering a quiet thank you. She ate slowly, letting each bite settle gently, as though nourishing not just her body but the calm she carried within. Yeshua rested a short distance away beneath the same tree, leaning back against the trunk with his eyes half closed. He looked peaceful, not asleep, but embraced by stillness, as though listening to the soft movements of the world around him. For a long while, Mary simply sat and observed the play of light through the leaves and the subtle rise and fall of the hillside in the distance. A sense of timelessness washed over her, as though the worries of the past and the uncertainties of the future had drifted far away, leaving only this quiet moment beneath a gentle sky. When Yeshua opened his eyes, they met Mary's for a brief, serene moment. No words were needed. His expression conveyed something simple and steady, an assurance, a recognition, a quiet welcome into the peace of the day. The breeze shifted again, carrying the scent of figs and warm earth. Mary leaned back on her elbows, letting the cool shade wrap around her like a soft blanket. The world seemed to hum with a slow, tranquil rhythm. A rhythm that invited rest. A rhythm that lulled the mind toward calm and quiet reflection. For Mary, it felt like another small step into a life she was only beginning to understand, a life shaped not by fear, but by gentle, unfolding peace. After their rest beneath the fig tree, the group continued along the road until they reached a small village nestled between gentle hills. It was the kind of place where time seemed to move slower, where the houses were built from sun-warmed stone, and where narrow footpaths curved like calm streams between the walls. Mary noticed how peaceful everything felt the moment they stepped into the outskirts. A shepherd guided his flock lazily toward the shade. An older woman swept dust from her doorstep with unhurried, rhythmic strokes. Children chased one another in soft, breathless laughter that floated faintly through the air. The group didn't draw much attention at first. Villages along the Sea of Galilee often welcomed travelers, especially those who moved with kindness and quiet purpose. When the villagers realized Yeshua was among them, they approached with gentle curiosity rather than urgency, a contrast to the loud, bustling crowds Mary remembered from larger towns. A man invited them to rest in the courtyard of his home. The space was shaded by woven reed mats stretched overhead, casting a cool, patterned shadow on the ground below. Clay jars filled with fresh water lined the wall, their surfaces beaded with droplets from the cool liquid inside. Mary accepted a cup and drank slowly, letting the water soothe her throat. Around her, the disciples settled down, stretching their legs, loosening their sandals, their movements echoing the soft relaxation of the afternoon. The host's wife brought out bread still warm from the oven, its scent comforting and gentle. Mary tore off a small piece, savoring the simple flavor, the soft texture. Everything, the bread, the shade, the quiet voice of the breeze slipping through the courtyard, felt like a lullaby for the soul. Yeshua spoke with the villagers in low, calm tones. Not preaching. Not stirring crowds. Just listening. Offering a word of comfort. A bit of wisdom. A smile that quieted even the worries people didn't voice. Mary watched him, not with intensity, but with quiet gratitude, grateful to witness this peace, grateful to feel part of something steady and human and gentle. The afternoon stretched like a warm blanket across the village. The sunlight softened into gold. Shadows lengthened into soothing shapes. And Mary found herself drifting into the softness of the moment, feeling her spirit expand in calm, unhurried breaths. When the sun began to sink toward the horizon, the group rose to continue on their way. The villagers offered blessings for the journey, and the travelers responded with warm thanks before stepping once more onto the open road. The hills around them were touched with the first colors of dusk, soft rose, muted amber, and the gentle purple that comes just before nightfall. The air cooled slowly, brushing their skin like the light sweep of silk. As they walked, Mary felt the land itself begin to settle. Birdsong quieted. The hum of insects softened. The sky deepened into a dreamy blue that seemed to hold the promise of restful silence. Yeshua walked at a steady pace, but not quickly. There was no need. No urgency. Only the slow descent of day, matching the calm rhythm of their footsteps. Mary felt a deep tranquility settle across her shoulders, like a shawl woven from the colors of the fading sky. She watched the hills shift in the dimming light, each curve softened, each shadow stretched long and gentle. A small fire was lit when they found a place to stop for the evening, a hollow between two hills that sheltered them from the wind. The flames flickered in quiet patterns, their glow warm but not bright, perfect for a night meant for rest rather than wakefulness. The disciples spoke softly around the fire, sharing simple stories from their past, not dramatic tales, but small memories, moments of childhood, favorite foods, tiny jokes whispered in kitchens long ago. Their voices blended like a slow, soothing melody. Mary sat a little apart from the fire, watching the sparks drift upward, dissolving into the deepening night. Overhead, the first stars began to appear, shimmering faintly against the quiet sky. She felt held by the darkness, not lost in it, but embraced. The world felt vast yet comforting. Still, yet alive with gentle sounds. Yeshua approached and sat beside her. He didn't speak at first. He simply watched the sky with her, letting the silence settle comfortably between them. At last, in a voice low and steady, he said, "Even in the quiet places, Mary, there is guidance." She nodded softly, not needing to answer aloud. She felt it too, a sense that every peaceful step, every calm breath, was leading her towards something deep and steady within herself. As the fire crackled softly and the night wrapped around them, Mary felt her eyes grow heavy. The journey, the day, the soft dusk air, everything invited sleep. And as she drifted, she felt perfectly safe, perfectly present, perfectly at rest. Mary awoke before the others, just as the horizon began to glow with the faintest trace of dawn. The fire had burned down to soft embers, glowing like tiny stars resting on the earth. The air was cool and still, carrying only the distant hum of waking birds. She rose quietly, careful not to disturb those still sleeping. A pale, silver mist drifted between the hills, giving the world a dreamlike softness, as though everything were wrapped in a gentle veil of early morning calm. Mary walked a short distance up a slope, her sandals brushing against the dew-touched grass. At the top, she paused and watched the sky open slowly into light. For a long time, she simply breathed. Each inhale slow and deep. Each exhale warm and grounding. She thought of the days behind her, the storms she had survived, the peace she had rediscovered, the quiet companionship she had found among these wanderers who walked with purpose yet moved gently through the world. She felt no longing for the life she had left behind. No fear of the one ahead. Only a steady unfolding, like petals opening to the sun. When she returned to the camp, the disciples were stirring, stretching their arms, rubbing sleep from their eyes. Someone lit a small lantern to guide their preparations, its warm glow flickering softly against the morning mist. Yeshua approached her with a calm smile, the quiet kind that carried both welcome and understanding. "Did you sleep well?" he asked softly. "Yes," Mary murmured. "Better than I have in many years." He nodded, his expression full of gentle warmth. "Then let the peace of this morning stay with you." His words settled in her heart like a stone placed carefully into calm water, creating quiet ripples that spread outward, slow and soothing. As they prepared to continue their journey, the lantern's glow lingered in the growing daylight, its soft flame a symbol of inner light, the kind that did not flicker with the wind, the kind that guided from within. Mary stepped onto the path once more, feeling rested, centered, and quietly ready. The road stretched forward, calm and unhurried, the hills whispering with the promise of a new day. They traveled for several hours, crossing fields where the wind moved gently through tall grasses and weaving through small clusters of olive trees whose branches offered pockets of shade. As the sun climbed higher, the world around them grew bright and warm, but the pace remained easy, steady, peaceful. Eventually, they reached a quiet overlook, a place where the land opened wide, revealing the rolling hills below and the distant shimmer of the lake they had left behind. The group stopped to rest, settling onto smooth rocks warmed by the sun. Mary stepped to the edge of the overlook, letting her gaze drift across the vast, open landscape. The breeze carried the soft scent of wild herbs and warm earth. Everything felt expansive, yet calming, as though the world exhaled in long, slow rhythms. Yeshua stood beside her, not speaking at first. He watched the horizon with her, sharing the quiet. At last, in a voice soft enough to blend with the wind, he said, "Mary, the peace you seek is not far from you. It is already within you. It has been waiting for you to notice." Mary closed her eyes, letting the words settle gently into her chest. Not as a lesson, not as a command, but as a truth she already felt, a truth she had been walking toward with each quiet step of their journey. She breathed deeply, and the peace within her expanded, filling the spaces that once held fear and doubt. It felt soft, warm, steady, a stillness that did not depend on the world around her, but grew from the quiet strength she was reclaiming. When she opened her eyes, the landscape looked different, not because it had changed, but because she had. The disciples gathered their things. The road awaited. But Mary did not rush. She took one more slow breath of the warm afternoon air, savoring the calm that now lived inside her like a steady flame. Then she turned and walked back to the group, her steps light and rooted at the same time, steps of someone who had found an inner compass she could follow no matter where the path might lead. And as they continued their journey across the gentle hills, Mary felt profoundly at peace. Not at the end of her story, but at the beginning of her quiet, steady truth. Thank you for sharing this peaceful moment with me. If you enjoyed this story and would like more gentle journeys into history and calm, please subscribe and rest easy knowing you're part of this quiet, caring space. May your night be filled with restful dreams, and may you wake with a heart full of peace. Good night, and until next time, sleep well.